It's a good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy, Millsy. Back with Hometown Commander, back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew a version 1.0 deck lists of the commanders in front of us on my quest to brew the magic world. You know the motto, baby. It's ABB, always be brewing, and that's what we're back to do today. The deck list is going to be down in the description for you below, so I'd really appreciate it if you could interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe, consider leaving a comment down below, start the discussion. But today, we are covering another commander over Innistrad's history, and like we did with Gitrog earlier a few weeks ago, we're going to talk about Olivia again, but this time it isn't actually Olivia in one of her Innistrad printings. It was Olivia in Thunder Junction as Olivia Opulent Outlaw. This is a commander that we covered back when OTJ came out, but I thought it'd be fun to talk about Olivia again, not just because she's a vampire, and we have vampires in Innistrad or Master, and there's vampires that are in the deck, but because Outlaws are just a fun batch of creature types. Assassins, mercenaries, pirates, rogues, and warlocks. We got to see some new assassins in Assassin's Creed. Pirates got some love coming up, right, in Aetherdrift, and they got something else in Lost Caverns of Ixalan. So there's a lot of love here. The second reason I wanted to cover Olivia this week is that I think I've said on the channel before, if I haven't, my daughter's name is Olivia, and although she was not named after Olivia from Innistrad, I had set the goal to want to build some version of Olivia for myself, and so I've decided to build Olivia Opulent Outlaw for myself. So this Millsy Brews is a start of me going down the road of testing it and making it my own, and there are so many Outlaws that I love that I get to play in this deck. So Olivia has flying and lifelink, and it says whenever one or more Outlaws we control deal common damage to a player, we get to make a treasure. Great, right? Treasures are always great. And for 3 mana, we could sack 2 treasures to put 2 counters on each creature we control at sorcery speed. I love this idea because treasures are already an archetype that have so much support, and in fact, some of them are Outlaws, so that really helps us out. The other thing we can do with treasures is the classic aggravated assault, multiple combat style loops, which is something I've always loved. And so I think it'd be fun to throw that in here. We also get to play the classic treasure sport as well. So I think this deck's going to be a ton of fun. Although I'll be covering all my main decks getting updated in Aetherdrift, we won't be covering probably Olivia during Aetherdrift. But on a future set, we'll talk about my progress with this deck as I make it my own. But let's talk about the Outlaws, and it's good to remember: Assassin, Warlock, Pirate, Rogue, and Vampire? Mercenary, that's right. So lots of love here, lots of options. I think Angrath's Marauders is probably one of the first pirates that comes to mind for me, doubling up damage. It's a lot of mana, but I mean, I think this is a deck that wants to go wide anyway, especially when you have Outlaws that can make other tokens and things like that. So that makes a ton of sense. I think my 2 favorite cards from Assassin's Creed for this deck are Aya of Alexandria and Bayek of Siwa. So Aya, whenever an historic creature we control deals common damage to a player, we get to make an assassin. So remember that historics are artifacts, legendaries, and sagas. So basically all of our legendary creatures are going to make 1/1s when they hit. And then remember that those assassins are then Outlaws, right? So they're going to take real advantage of that. And then Bayek's going to give all of our historic creatures double strike. So this is really useful because then we're giving all of our legendaries double strike, and they get even better. Olivia gets even better. Remember that this damage from Olivia is not capped once per turn. It's just on damage, meaning that Bayek's double strike actually can produce multiple treasures per turn, and that's very helpful, right, over the course of multiple turns. Breen is a card I've always loved. Andrew, a member of our play group, played a Brina deck for a long time. I think Brina is a word salad of a card, but it's really fun. It says whenever a player attacks one of your opponents, if that opponent has more life than any other of your opponents, that attacking player draws a card, and we put 2 counters on a creature we control. This, although it may be a word salad, hopefully entices your opponents to attack your other opponents because they get to draw cards and we get to buff our creatures, leading to hopefully either a big Olivia in the sky or some big other creatures. I didn't have Grenzo in my original build for this deck, but I think it's a fun one. It says whenever a creature we control deals common damage to a player, not it, just anything, we get our choice of 2 different things. We can go to creature, which is very helpful, right? Forcing that thing to attack anything but us. Or we can exile the top card of that player's library and play that card until the end of turn, which is kind of interesting as well, right? Potentially some stealing. I like this. I mean, It's a good way to goad, maybe a key creature we don't want attacking us, or get some value off the top. And for just 2 mana, I think Grenzel's really worth it because it doesn't even have to attack to do it. On the other side of the spectrum, Grim Hiring is a value engine. Whenever one of our creatures we control deal combat damage to a player, we make 2 treasures. So with Grim Hireling and Olivia out, anytime any of our Outlaws are hitting a player, we're making 3 treasures per player, and that's going to really stack up over the course of a turn. And we can pay a black and sack X treasures to creature -X/-X till end turn, so some removal. But Grim Hireling is a key piece, especially if you want to start manipulating treasures for any other effects. Hellspur Posse Boss gives all of our other Outlaws haste, and whenever it comes in, makes a couple of mercenary tokens alongside it. I just like that it gives all of our mercenaries, or all of our Outlaws haste, meaning that if we have key Outlaws that come in and don't have haste, they get to attack that same turn. Kellogg from Fallout's great here. Whenever it attacks, it gets a treasure, and we get sack 5 treasures, just get control of something for as long as we have Kellogg at sorcery speed. This is really helpful to take an opponent's key creatures, take their commander, then they can't put it back in the command zone until it dies or gets exiled, or just take a key value piece away from somebody and hold on to it. Probably one of my favorite Outlaws in the deck. And the deck I covered back in Outlaw Thunder Junction and a deck I've enjoyed playing on Arena is Laughing Jasper Flint. Those creatures we don't control, or we control but don't own, are mercenaries to show their types. So these other effects that steal are going to help that. But Flint does it for himself. At the beginning of our upkeep, we get to exile the top X cards of target opponent's library, where X is the number of Outlaws we control, and we can cast spells from among them and pay manas of any type. This is just a fun effect. The wider we go, the more cards we get to take from our opponents, play their removal, play their things. I love Flint, and he has such a great spot in this deck to help get us more value. Magda says whenever we commit a crime, we make a tap treasure. This happens only once per turn. This is helpful on our turn, right, for things like Flint, but useful for things like removal as well. And then we can sack 3 treasures to make a Scorpion Dragon token with flying and haste. So a way to potentially turn our treasures into tokens. And when we talk about our treasures, we'll talk about ways that we could profit from treasures leaving the battlefield. And of course, that helps with that. Masker Girl is a great one from Marza Carla Manor, giving all of our creatures Wither. Going to be really beneficial to really stop our opponents from chump blocking, because they take damage in the form of -1/-1 counters, right, really shrinking their creatures. But whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, if its toughness was less than 1, we draw cards. This is a way that if our opponents block or trade with our creatures, we're going to get to draw for each one of them and help churn through our deck and get more value. Everybody's favorite demon, everyone's favorite Rakdos Warlock is back. Prosper is here, and his effect's really helpful. To our end step, we get to exile the top card of our library. We could play it till our next turn. And whenever we play a card from exile, we make a treasure. Again, the deck has multiple ways to play things from exile, but Prosper also gives us one. And it makes treasures, which is beneficial, right, when we're trying to amass treasures for our abilities. Prosper's Bandit's a cute little guy, but he can bring him down with Offspring, and then whenever it deals damage to a player, we make that many tap treasures. Unfortunately, they do come in tapped, so when we talk about kind of the aggravated assault shenanigans, Bandit isn't the best one for that. But remember that with Olivia's ability, those treasures do not have to be untapped, so we could sacrifice the treasures that are made tapped for that. But what I think Bandit's really good for is that you kind of get to use those treasures next turn. You're kind of biding over for next turn, which can still be really helpful. Treasures are also still artifacts if we have any cards that care about that. I think it was only right to have at least one Marchesa in the deck, considering she is an outlaw. When she comes in, we become the Monarch. At the beginning of our upkeep, if an opponent's the Monarch, we get to make an assassin with Death Touch and Haste. Again, make another outlaw, right, just to be a hassle for our opponents. Rakdos the Muscle may be an odd outlaw, but he's one we'll happily play. A 6/5 Flample. Whenever we sacrifice a creature, we get to exile cards equal to its mana value from the top of a target opponent's library until our next end step. We could play those cards, and we could just sack another creature to give it indestructible. What I like about Rakdos is if I sack a creature to give it indestructible during an opponent's turn, right, I get to play those cards during my turn. Or if I do it, during my turn, I still get to play them. But what's nice is if I want to give up a token, right, I don't get any cards. But if I give up a creature, I could potentially get some cards. The other thing that's nice about this is we have things, right, that make these assassin tokens and things like that, which just turn into free ways to keep Rakdos indestructible to hopefully protect it from some things. I think one of my favorite cards to be added to this deck since OTJ came out is the Lord of Pain, which people probably hadn't thought about, but it is an assassin, so it is an outlaw. Opponents can't gain life. Whenever a player casts their first spell each turn, choose another target player. It deals damage equal to the spell's mana value to that chosen player. This is just great. Won't trigger Olivia, of course, because it's a combat damage trigger, but just start spreading the love around. When you cast spells, you can give it another opponent. When opponents are casting spells, you give another opponent, just running that damage around and really just making sure that we're softening up our opponents to be even easier for us. I think if I had to pick another commander to helm this deck, it would definitely be Vihan. Other outlaws we control have Vigilance and Haste. Vigilance is actually a really nice ability to allow them to block. But his key ability is at the start of a combat on our turn, we can have our treasures turn into 3/3 assassins, which is huge, right? Giving them Vigilance and Haste, meaning the treasures can attack and then still tap later to make mana. I love Vihan. I think it fits really well as his own commander and really well in this deck. But I like it because then it can turn our treasures into creatures, making more treasures, right? And just really hitting our opponents hard. Back in Town's great because it's a mass reanimation spell for outlaws, and obviously every creature in our deck is an outlaw, so we could get key Kree outlaws back, at sorcery speed. And then we have a token creation option in Formal Posse, just make it a bunch of mercenaries, which again are outlaws. We get two awesome enchantments that may be uncommons, but I think they fit our deck so well. At Knife Point, it says outlaws we control have first strike. Whenever we commit a crime, we get a mercenary. Rakish Shrew comes in and gives us a mercenary, and whenever an outlaw we control dies, everybody loses one and we gain one. Rakish Shrew is really nice with Vihan because they stay treasures until the end of turn, meaning that Rakish Shrew has some fun with that when we go to sacrifice them for mana. But we talked about the outlaws. Let's talk about treasures. We're playing a couple non-outlaw creatures just because they care about treasures. Kenny Manufacturer, Goldspan Dragon, Zorn. These are not outlaws, but they help us with the treasures. Kenny Manufacturer is going to make a clue, a food, and a treasure anytime we would make one of them. This just gives us more artifacts for anything that might care about them. Zorn adds an extra treasure every time we make a treasure, which would turn Olivia's first ability into 2 every time, which is great. And then Goldspan Dragon, whenever it attacks or becomes the target of a spell, we get a treasure, and treasures tap for 2 mana instead of 1, which is a huge ability, especially when we start using them for mana. But I think the other great way that we get to use treasures is using draw spells that make treasures. Red's so good at pitching a card to draw 2. Well, here are spells that let you pitch a card, draw 2, and make a couple of treasures to, again, fund other things or use these abilities that care about treasures to work our game plan. But I think of the treasure payoffs, this is probably my favorite slide, including some of the most popular cards you'd expect when you'd be talking about treasures. Age of the Iron Throne over on the left. So as long as Olivia and this is out at the same time, anytime an artifact or creature would go from the graveyard to the graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent loses a life. So basically, anytime we sack a treasure, everybody loses a life, which is huge, right? If we're sacking multiple treasures per turn. Rain of Riches gives the first spell each turn we cast with mana from a treasure cascade, allowing us to get deeper into our deck for more things. And then Revel of Riches, whenever a creature opponent controls dies, we get a treasure, and at the start of our turn, if we have 10 or more treasures, we win the game. Just a nice alternate win con for the deck, especially if we amass a bunch of treasures and somebody wipes our board, right? We still have an option to win the game. But I talk about multiple combats, and I think that's one of the easiest ways to probably take this deck and push it up a power level. If you have never seen Aggravated Assault, it's a 3-mana enchantment. This is for 5 mana. You can tap all creatures you control. And after this main phase, there's an additional combat phase followed by additional main phase, only at sorcery speed. It's 5 mana to do it. So if we have an outlaw hit all 3 of our opponents, that's 3 treasures. We would need to find some way to get 2 more treasures or to net more treasures than that to go infinite on combats. We would also want to make sure that we can hit in infinitely, right? Otherwise, creatures can be blocked and die. But there's a lot of ways to do this. We have things like the Reaver Cleaver, which gives a creature +1/+1 trample, and whenever it hits a player, we get that many treasures. This would be great on something like Olivia in the air, because then it's going to be getting, hopefully, a bunch of treasures every time. But we also have multiple combat spells, like Overpowering Attack, that can give you an extra combat. And since Olivia is in the air, it's probably going to end up hitting our opponents every turn, meaning we can free run that Overpowering Attack. But I've said it before on the show, and I'll say it again. No deck's ever complete. Although we looked at Olivia and we're looking at her again, there's still a lot to consider, including probably the one change that's going to be different between this brew that I did that I try to keep at that Millsy Brews budget and my budget, which is Bitter Blossom. I have a copy of Bitter Blossom in my binder, and I'm very excited to put it in because it makes a Fairy Rogue token, which is an Outlaw, meaning you're getting an Outlaw in the air every turn and losing a life for it. But hey, another Outlaw means potentially better damage for Olivia. We are playing protection spells in the deck, but maybe adding something like a Flawless Maneuver or more stuff like that. Maybe the more expensive protection spells. I'm thinking like Flawless Maneuver and Clever Concealment are always great for protecting the board. And then I like the look of Archpriest of Shadows, a creature that can get things back from the graveyard, especially when they start taking out our key targets. I just wasn't sure how that was going to look. I think we really need to go through testing, making sure the deck functions the way we want it to, before we start nitpicking on some of the recursion, even though the deck is playing recursion. Let's get into our playtest. Give me a 4-lander with Seize the Spoils, Mirror Entity, which is every creature type, so it's going to be an Outlaw. It has a great ability that for X mana we can turn all of our creatures into XXs, which is great, right? And then Aya. So not bad. Remember, we need 4 to get to Olivia. We do Angelic Sellsword, a 5-mana Flying Vigilance Angel Mercenary. Whenever it or another non-token creature comes in, we make a mercenary, so we're making an Outlaw. And then whenever it attacks, if it's power 6 or greater, we get to draw a card. So remember that the mercenaries can tap to buff a creature, so it could buff the Sellsword to draw us a card. I think the answer this turn is the Ruins, right? Get it in untapped while we can. Work our way to see what we need next. Prosperous Partnership is a card I've loved in other decks. That feels great here. You could tap 3 untapped creatures to make a treasure at instant speed, so if you make some tokens, right, you could tap them to make some things. I think we'll just get another land in here. That's not a bad thing to do next turn. Although the citizens aren't outlaws, you at least can get yourself towards getting that. Vault of the Archangel is great. Give Death Touch and lifelink to creatures. I think there's 2 choices here. Start the partnership or just go ahead and seize the spoils. I like Sellsword, but I think it'd be the card I would take out of my hand. Get a couple treasures. I'd get a treasure. It would guarantee Olivia next turn. I guess we could see if we could do more than that, or get the partnership down, get Olivia down next turn, and we would be able to net a token or net a treasure, right, for that purpose. So I think there's a couple options there. I kind of like the idea of seeing what the partnership can do for us, making 2 citizens. Moving to our next turn. Ooh, Ruinous Ultimatum is great. A great way to have a big one-sided board wipe. So here I think I just Olivia. Again, Olivia doesn't have haste, so not going to attack. But the nice part here is that before our turn, if these guys are still alive, we can tap all 3 of them for that treasure, right? And come back to our turn with a little bit more mana. Cool is an interesting option. Flying Trample 5/5. So again, hopefully it'll just hit in. We could sacrifice 3 other creatures to put a creature from our hand onto the battlefield. So if we have a bunch of these, extra creatures laying around, we can do that. Aya could be interesting this turn, allowing Olivia to make us a 1/1 assassin. I think Seize the Spoils could make sense, get us another treasure, churn through our deck a little bit. We could actually do that plus Aya if we wanted to. We could get Mirror Entity down to potentially buff our creatures. I kind of like starting with the Seize the Spoils and see how it goes. Let's pitch the Sellsword, draw 2 and make another treasure. We see Treasure Vault, a land that can make more treasures, very interesting, and then some more lands. So that's not too bad. I kind of like the idea of just getting Aya down here, even though we're going to lose the treasures. Olivia's probably going to end up hitting the air this turn, which is going to end up making us another treasure and making us one of those assassins. Right? So that's pretty great, because then that assassin is a potential outlaw on a future turn that can get us a treasure. We don't really want to attack with the citizens. We can, but they're really not going to do us very good. And then in our opponent's turn, right, we can tap these 3 to get another treasure, right, coming back to our turn with another treasure. We see Captain Lannery Storm, which gets a treasure on attack. We do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We are 1 mana off of Ruinous Ultimatum, so we could go ahead and sack this landscape to go get looks like a swamp is what we need, just to kind of even up our colors. So that next turn, right, we could Ruinous Ultimatum if we want to. I think a cool makes sense. On a future turn, it could be harder to hit. I kind of like the idea of Mirror Entity, because then on a future turn, you're starting to make every creature get scary, right? 3 or 4 mana turns everything into a 4/4, and makes that a little bit harder. Say 4/5. I mean, I guess I could see the world where you like Mirror Entity plus Storm giving up one of the treasures. Cabin Lantern Storm can attack this turn to make another treasure. There's a lot of ways to look at that. I think Aya probably attacks this turn because Menace could be helpful for attacking. Maybe we get, I think we probably get at least one treasure for Olivia. Maybe we pick up that second one for Aya attacking. Again, just trying to buff our board up. And then now next turn we could think about using Olivia's bottom ability, to do that. But the truth is, on this turn, you can either just Ruinous Ultimatum to run the board if we're worried about that. And we could, pay 3 into, Mirror Entity if we want to. But I think, we would probably be able to get a treasure or 2 out of the Prosperous Partnership if we didn't attack. Probably at least just 1. It'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we would have 1. Wouldn't have enough to activate Olivia. But I think that's okay. I mean, Ruinous Ultimatum probably at this point just sets our opponents back a ton, right? And then this turn we're guaranteed 3 treasures, right? Because they hopefully wouldn't have any blockers, and we could have an Outlaw, right? Hit every single opponent, right? Netting us 3 more treasures. We used one of those for the Ruinous Ultimatum. Making what? 1, 2, 3 assassins, right? Because of Aya. Now we got lots more Outlaws, and now maybe next turn's the turn where we pay the mana into Olivia to buff all of them and just keep them with a threat. Again, we would have loved to have seen protection this game, but there's another option on a future turn where we just, give Death Touch and Lifelink with Vault of the Archangel, and then, all these become even scarier, right? Even though they already have those abilities. But let's get into playtest number 2. Given a 2-lander with a Soaring, Prosper, Night's Whisper for some draw, Mirror Entity again, and Aya again. It's not a bad start. I mean, there's the argument to go, turn 1 Soaring, but I think it makes more sense to put it in tapped. Turn 1's the turn 2. We could play the Tainted Field, get into the Soaring, and we could Night's Whisper. It would get us up to a full hand. Just get access to a couple more cards, churn through the deck. Grim Hireling's great. Flint's great, right? Now we're looking great on our turn. We just want some ways to make some mana. So we could Olivia this turn, set her up to attack next turn, or we can Prosper. That's kind of my thought. Prosper would potentially set up getting a treasure next turn, but I think it's just Olivia, get her ready to attack next turn, get her ready to go. Go into our next turn here. 6 mana, but if I put down the Talisman, it's 5. Right? Lord of Pain could be fun. Our Aya could be good. It's fun, especially since we're getting Olivia in this turn. Right? Grim Hireling could be good since we're getting Olivia in this turn. Right? I think it's pretty fair to assume that on turn 4 with a flyer, somebody might not have a flyer, and we could get her in somewhere. So I guess there's an argument for Grim Hireling for the treasures, Aya for the Outlaws. I think if I'm going to go with Grim Hireling, I'd probably just Talisman into it. Attack with Olivia, and we get 3 treasures, right? 2 for Grim Hireling, 1 for Olivia. And now we're setting up Hireling to hopefully, right, get some more on future turns. Turn 5, Tainted Peak's going to get turned on, so 5, 6, 7, 8 mana. I love Flint for a future turn to start sealing some things. And I really love Lord of Pain, to start dealing some damage around. I think there's a lot of options this turn. I think Aya makes a ton of sense. We could potentially get an assassin and get another Outlaw here. That leaves me 4 left. I just go with Flint, get its ability ready for next turn. Olivia probably just hits again to get us a bunch of things. And then, coming back to our turn, we have 5 Outlaws, so we could hit the top 5 cards of somebody's deck. Maybe we, get into something we want to play instead. We've got enough mana and treasures to start putting counters on all of our creatures, right? And then, the great thing about Flint is if he steals something, it becomes an Outlaw, right? So it's getting the benefit of Olivia's things. But I think here it's probably just like Lord of Pain plus the Olivia ability just to give them all, right, 2+1 counters. That way, Aya's better to hit this turn. The Hireling's probably easier to hit this turn. Olivia's got a better chance to hit this turn. Flint can attack this turn. The Assassin can attack, probably meaning that we should get at least 2 to 3 treasures. Aya should make us another Assassin. I've found that Aya probably gets in as well, so at least 2 more. And now I think we're really starting to move and groove. All we're really missing is that protection piece. But if somebody doesn't get rid of Flint, now coming back to our turn, we're nuking somebody for 8 cards off the top, digging for their protection, their things, and I think this is what I like about Flint in a deck like this is getting the value that way. Let's get into playtest number 3. Give it a 3-lander with no white. It's kind of awkward. But we have the Windfall there. We have the Sign in Blood, Canyon Manufacturer, and Deadly Dispute, which can also get us a treasure. Well, there's the way to get a white, potentially, but I think it's Canyon Slough turn 1. Guess turn 2, we could play the Summit. I don't know that we'd want to do the Sign in Blood, because if we do, we'd have to pitch a card, right? I don't really see anything else during 2-2, so maybe we just crack the landscape and go get a Plains, right? Make sure we have that white source ready to go for a future turn. Turn 3, we can get the Dragon Skull Summit in, and now I think it's Knife Point. On a future turn, we can either, and the next turn we can either Olivia or do something like the Windfall to get some treasures. But I think it's just Olivia here, get her set up for the next turn, right, to be able to attack. So that when we come in here now, I mean the Windfall could make sense. I think the Sign in Blood could also make sense to churn through our deck and get access to some spells. But I think I would just attack with Olivia, get that treasure. I would just Sign in Blood just to see what we can get access to. There's another Tri-land and some more removal. So remember, the removal can get us Mercenaries with Knife Point. So we've got 3 mana left. We've got Bedevil. We've got Path Exile. Because of the Sign in Blood, I don't think we can currently cast Bedevil. So Path Exile is the only one that we can use for that. But I think Path could be great as well here, right, to take out something pesky and do that. Or we could just put this treasure and our rest of our mana into something like Windfall, draw a couple extra cards, get a couple treasures, and set up for next turn. Here, I mean, it's hard. I like Bedevil. I like Canyon Manufacturer for the extra draw from the clues and all that. Deadly Dispute feels good once we make some tokens. I think this is the hard part is, do you leave? I guess we could do Windfall and leave the Path Exile up, right? Because we would get 2 treasures. So I think I would do that. I have to sack the treasure to do it. Just purposes of this, we'll do the Manufacturer, make 2 treasures, just set us up for next turn. We're going to come and tap because of that Swamp. Now we got 6, 7, 8. Overpowering attack can give us an extra combat. I think it's... really would have loved to see another creature, right? But I guess if we pathed, we would have one with at Knife Point. I guess we could just remove something during our turn, right, to get a Mercenary as well. But it kind of makes more sense to do it during our opponent's turn, right? I don't really want to use the Deadly Dispute to sack a treasure to draw, but it is an option. This is kind of an awkward one where we didn't really see many more Outlaws. I guess Olivia probably just hits and we hold up the removal. Maybe we end up making a Mercenary or 2 as the time goes around the table. And then now I would just Deadly Dispute a token. Draw 2, make another treasure, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 mana. So there's the Lord of Pain, there's Grenzo, probably just making this turn all that little more better, right? Because now Olivia can attack, making us a treasure. We can goad something, and I think this feels a little better now. The Lord of Pain is going to start handing out some damage. And then now, we can work our way towards giving them Death Touch and Lifelink with Vault to the Archangel. The cool part about that Grenzo's ability is it is going to target, so Knife Point would give us another Mercenary, right? And I think we just amass, the nice part about amassing these Mercenaries is then, Mirror Entity could turn them all into big creatures, right? There's other ways to look at this board state. Again, I would have loved which is sad because we played what 2 card draw spells, and I just feel like we didn't get into anything. But I think that's where you want to play test sometimes to see are you getting enough of your gas? Is it too clunky? Sometimes you need to see that. I think some of the consistency can be fixed by more or different draw spells or what have you. That's why we test, and I think that will be something I look forward to in testing. But let me know, what do you think of Olivia? Even though she's not in her classic Innistrad garb, she's still enjoying herself on Thunder Junction, and I think this is a really interesting deck, and you play a lot of fun Outlaws. But let me know what you think, and I will catch you all in the next one.